You never have to write on. Are you writing on pen and pad ever, or is everything kind of?
Yeah, but during games, I'm still like one of the old school people like that keeps my stats on like a pen and paper just because I like to track it that way during a game.
You need like a press hat, like the actual
like
sign.
the old, like the fedora with
That's
the
what I want.
like, thing in there and
Yes.
the flask in my boot.
I got a story. See, I got a story.
A cigar.
This story's gonna break.
I love the old stories of like these old guys that tell about, I don't know.
You
just
run
like,
into those guys?
Yeah, it's. I mean, some of these guys are still pretty crazy. Like there was just like a couple years ago. I used to work in Philly, and a couple years ago, like the beat writers for the Eagles like got in a fist fight. Like, it's still like kind of like yeah.
Are they older guys?
No, well, one was older and one was younger. Is the best part.
Well, we're rolling.
Okay,
We've started.
Like, let's start with that.
I love that. Oh man, this is. Oh, hey everybody, you're listening to a chatter of fact. Again, these are not interviews; they are conversations. This is an interesting one. I have Shannon Ryan on. We have you're a heavy hitter because you're a writer for the Chicago Tribune, right? Am I right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I mean that's a huge publication. So I didn't find somebody from the First Street Gazette. Like my first reporter is a pretty hardcore. Folks, she's a sports writer. And we're going to delve into that. And I have so many questions for you.
Good.
And I love the fact that you were wondering, you want me on a Chatter of Fact? But why?
Because I ask all the questions.
Yes.
Why would someone want to ask me questions?
I am unpacking this, and I can't wait. People, you're in for a treat because nobody does this. Nobody does this. The journalists, especially sports writers, but all journalists, newspaper journalists in particular, I feel like it's been glamorized and unglamorized in movies and things like that, books, the whole thing. But realistically, unless you're somebody who's done a little bit of research, just on air, nobody interviews interviewers. It really doesn't happen. And I was talking to you about this before we finished our coffee and your tea. She's not drinking the coffee.
I know, I'm going to get kicked off.
She's in for the tea. But when I started to talk to you about this, I feel like people like you who interview folks, the only time you're interviewed is when you're being asked about someone you interviewed.
Yeah, that's true. You're not asked
I mean?
about yourself. And that's part of journalism is you're supposed to be kind of anonymous.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be, and that's changing, maybe for the worse, but you're supposed to just be this nameless person almost. Yeah,
with the
with
facts.
No opinions. And,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who it was, but because I think you do see, especially political reporters, definitely leaning and giving opinions. And I wish I could remember who was on, this was years ago, on David Letterman or something. He had somebody who'd been in the game for a while, but he couldn't get them to say anything about their personal opinion. The guy refused the entire time because he kept saying, no. I have to stay objective. I have to stay neutral. I'm a reporter. I can't give you my opinion. And yeah, that is changing.
It is changing a lot.
Lot.
Especially with social media.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of blurred lines really now because in a way with Twitter, and that draws people into reading your articles, so they want you to have a personality, but at the same time, like, be objective and don't. So you have to find ways, and it's there can be times people maybe cross the line, and times where it can be real tricky, or you question like, should I have said that or tweeted that? I might be questioning myself after this.
This is why you're here, though, because that's the thing that makes you an artist. Because you have to be creative. You have to be a creative writer to do what you do. And it really hit me when I heard you speak the first time we met. You were talking about the angles, and that fascinates me. You talked about the reporters that have to follow a baseball team around in particular. Because how many games, over 100 games a year, and you're basically writing the same story. There aren't that many different ways a game is going to end.
Mm-hmm. And usually like pretty low scoring and not much in baseball. But
and you have to find an angle. So I want to delve into that, but I also want to delve into the world of journalism, especially as it stands today, because things are changing. I remember being a kid and first off just wanting to read Sunday funnies, but then secondly, when I was a teenager, enjoying the newspaper. So it's such a changing platform for journalism these days. And I know the online presence helps
Right.
because now you have your stories, living there digitally, but you're still on ink and paper too, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so
funny.
cool.
When I see someone on the train reading an actual newspaper, I'm like really tempted to hug them and be like, "You're keeping me employed.
It's
Thank
such
you."
a thing,
And just like you care
know?
about this, but a lot of people are reading, and I do that too. I read a lot of stuff on my phone. So
Yeah, but if you are going to do this, you're doing it for, in like the third biggest market in the country. You're doing it for a major publication. So that's pretty awesome.
I mean, I'm happy here. I
Yeah.
like it.
So I want to get into that. I want to get into just so much. So folks, just buckle in, man. Pour yourself some Irish cream and coffee or tea because she's having tea.
Right.
And let's dig into this. So, all right, you're a sports writer for the Chicago Tribune, and then the online presence, is it just called the Tribune Online? What do they call that? Do you know?
I mean, still chicagotribune.com.
Yeah. Okay. So it's as simple as
same
that.
thing, yeah.
And did you grow up in Philadelphia?
No, I grew up in kind of middle of nowhere, Ohio.
Really?
Kind of a rural. Next door to my house was my neighbors were cows. Not our cows, but that's where the property lined up.
Did you have a farm?
I didn't have a farm. I was kind
Okay.
of like an outsider. We had like tractor day, and I didn't have a tractor because we didn't live on a farm. Kids drove their tractors to school, and like farming was like a big thing. So like played outside a lot, obviously, and played in the mud. But I kind of always wanted to live in a city.
Were you mad at your parents? Like, we need a pig or something.
Well,
We're
my
not-
older brother and older sister were in 4-H. Do you guys city folks know what 4-H is?
Not a clue.
You don't. Oh. So it's an organization. I think it's like a community organization, but a lot of it is, there are some cities with it, but where we were, it was like mostly like farming or, like sewing projects, things like that. But a lot of the kids would get, like my brother would have a cow, or not a cow, a pig every summer, a few summers. My sister would like get a lamb, and we had like this pen, and they'd be
This is like
in
an
there.
animal
Yeah,
exchange
I know, who knew?
student sort of thing.
We had exchange students too through 4-H, Japanese exchange students through 4-H too. But yeah, so anyways, they would take their animals to the fair, and we'd say bye-bye. But that was like, I was very little, and I was
When you
very
say they get
hands-off.
bye-bye, they went to the fair. Wait, did they
Yeah.
first take them to the fair just to win something, or were they?
They can
just,
win, but then like someone,
But
they
then after
auction
that,
them,
it's like,
and
you're going to be my chops,
You're bacon,
lamb.
yeah. Yeah.
You're bacon. Oh, wow.
So yeah, sad.
See, you
but yeah,
needed a
so
little
I didn't.
spider.
Yeah, I know. I was the only one of my siblings to not be in 4-H, so I was an outsider. No,
You needed
so,
the little. Was her name Charlotte? You needed Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte. That would have
Oh,
been good. But
too
yeah,
bad.
so rural, very rural community.
Wow.
But then, yeah, kind of.
So then, were you into writing as a youth? Did you?
I always loved writing. I mean, I liked writing creatively. Even when I was little, I was always like writing, making up stories and writing stuff all the time and writing little books.
So then,
and-
how do you make the leap to journalism then?
I
Because
think then, I mean, in high school,
different,
we had like a really, I mean, it was, I don't even know if you should call it a newspaper, like, 4 pages stapled together kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah.
And then in college, I got really into it because the college paper was a really good paper, and I just saw like this bigger purpose to it and kind of fell in love with the whole idea of
Really?
journalism. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So what kind of writing did you do in college?
So I did like some news. So I went to St. Mary's College, and with Notre Dame, they have a joint newspaper, and it's an independent daily newspaper. So you don't have an advisor. Like, we're making our own money.
St. Mary's, is that in Terre Haute?
That's in South Bend. It's like
Okay.
right across the street from Notre Dame. Like, there's one road. So we kind of share classes. And so just being there, I did news, and I did sports there because Notre Dame sports is pretty high
Huge.
profile.
Yeah.
So it was a good way to get into it. And
So that's what called out to you. Was it because it was high profile, or were you sort of interested
no, I mean,
in
but that
sports?
helped me get a job then, I think, because I had, I was covering teams that
Yeah.
everyone knew about, and,
Did you-
national publications were also covering.
Did
so.
you know much about sports before the fact, or did you?
Yeah,
were
I
you
mean,
a
I didn't play
fan?
like a lot of sports, but my family was like real into sports and real into, like every Saturday watching Notre Dame football games and, Cleveland sports, which it's amazing. Anyone can live in Cleveland and be a sports fan. Now I know the Cavs won, but before that, if you can live in Cleveland and still be a sports fan after
Yeah.
all their years of just misery, then
Yeah.
you are like a diehard. But, so I always really liked sports too. And I just, beyond really, I think it became to me, beyond the games, I enjoy that less and less, actually. So you just meet the most fascinating people. And now, you also see just parallels to our society.
Are you saying as far as
Yeah.
fans or the actual athletes or
Athletes, yeah. And
Really?
coaches, athletes, like just, I mean, like you can imagine when you watch, I mean, everyone kind of watches the Olympics every year. Like who cares about badminton?
Right.
Sorry to all the badminton
but
fans out there listening.
It's not
But,
the sexy
you're not like
sport.
sitting there like watching that
Yeah.
but you somehow get into it. It's on TV and you're like, whoa, curling, who's going to win the, just you're so into it
It's
because of like
fascinating.
the people, and you like find out like someone overcame all these odds, and you're like, and plus like some of these people you cover, like the best at what they're doing, like they're just,
I was thinking that, yeah, it was, when you watch somebody, no matter what the sport is, but they're the best in the world,
Yeah.
it's hard to not be somewhat captivated by it, even if it's not your jam, even if it's not your sport of choice. It's the best in the
Yeah.
world. I mean, I remember I used to do some video production work for DePaul University,
Mm-hmm.
and the year that I did that, they had, like, their softball team was...
yeah, they've had pretty good softball
Yeah,
teams,
they were
yeah.
ranked, whatever, number 1 or 2 nationally. It was huge. I was never really interested in watching people play softball, ever, But when you sit and you're watching, a nationally ranked athlete
Yeah.
do their thing, I was fascinated by it.
You're like, you're so much better at this than I am.
I just thought I could never, no, there's no way I can swing my arm as
Yeah.
fast as you just swung your arm. It
Right.
was crazy.
And it's funny how fans like lose sight of that, and I mean media too, because you just expect these people to churn out these amazing performances
Every
and
time.
break records every time. And
Well, yeah.
like, why weren't you the most amazing person in the world today?
I never thought about that,
Yeah.
but the pure anger that comes out,
it's disturbing sometimes. Yeah,
Well, you see it. You really
I see it because they email me.
Oh, really?
too.
The fans will?
Yeah, so I get some pretty rough emails.
Will they
too.
email you kind of saying, you were too easy on
Well, it's-
Joe Schmo football because he should have, whatever.
Yeah.
Do you get...
I'll like write an article, and off the same article I'll have someone email me like, oh, you're such a homer, you always want them to win, say nice things about, and off the same article like, why do you always hate them, you're such a hater, you're
and
the worst.
to a certain extent, if you're the home team writer, in a way, I mean, if you're writing about teams from Chicago, you sort of have to give it that
Well, you get, yeah,
slant.
right, you're gonna follow them, but some people are like, you're always too hard on this team.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, they lost, so I'm gonna say that.
Okay, so hold on.
Yeah.
You're in college,
Yeah, sorry.
covering Notre Dame sports, so that's big enough. And yeah, I would imagine that would blip on the radar more than somebody covering a smaller scene. So then, where's the first job come in?
So I kind of applied everywhere, and I'm like, if my first job's like at a weekly paper in Omaha, I'll take it, because
Yeah.
that's just what I wanted to do. But I wound up at the Philadelphia Inquirer. So they had like this 2-year internship program.
I'm not familiar. Is
Yeah.
that a big publication?
Yeah,
Is that their?
Yeah, it's a big paper. It's like now I don't know what
It's
it
like-
is,
like-
but it's like a top 15
Okay.
paper. Yeah, and that's like a huge sports town. Like they are just crazy.
Yeah.
Like their fans are crazy, but so I went there and started out just like covering high school sports, which is like everyone should have to do if you're going into sports writing, because it teaches you to really do a good job, because
that
you're
a
keeping
big-
your own stats, and you're out on sidelines on cold Friday nights when you're like 23 and would rather be with your friends at the bars and like so
That's right. So you don't have as much information readily, available to you when it's high school
and you have
sports.
to set come up with your own story. It's not like there's some PR person trying to help you. So it's a really good way, I think, to earn your chops in the business, and fewer people kind of are doing that because there's less high school coverages now because of the way papers have cut back. But so I just kind of worked my way up from there.
You mentioned PR people, so now for a sports writer, you'll have a PR person approach a writer to try to get you to write about their athlete. Is that right? Sometimes, yeah.
That's how it's supposed to work. But sometimes, the bigger the program is, the less they think they need you.
Sure.
And but yeah, like they're there to kind of facilitate story ideas or interviews or.
Oh wow! How long did you
Yeah.
do did you cover the high school sports?
Just like those 2 years, and then I think it was about around then. But I found some really cool stories. Like they sent me to Jamaica to cover like a track team there, and like it was one
Really?
of my favorite stories
A
ever.
Philadelphia track team went to Jamaica.
They have like this major track meet in Philadelphia every year called the Penn Relays, and I mean, and it's all the way from like high schools to like Olympic level. Like Marion Jones was there, and and it's just huge in colleges. Like it's just a huge track meet. And these Jamaican kids would come every year and just kick everyone's butt for these high schoolers. And I mean, so I went down there and did a story. And, you know, these kids were like training on like just dirt tracks, not even a track, just like a circle of dirt and like milk crates with like a broom across it as their hurdle. And like then there's these suburban like multi-billion-dollar schools with like every, you know, nutritionists and this, and these kids would just come up here and just like burn them every year. So it was like I love that. That was like my favorite story, just kind of seeing how they train and some of these.
So like I'm picturing, you know, and what, you were in your 20s when you did that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm like picturing like the old school, you know, you walk into like whoever, the editors or the publisher's office, you know, like, Chief, I got a story. You got to send me to Jamaica.
Yeah, I didn't propose it that way. And, you know, I think I had a really good editor who, you know, they were looking for different story ideas, and I don't even know how that came up, but just kind of like tossing things around in a meeting probably. And yeah, so I was like, yeah, I'll go to Jamaica.
I mean, that had to feel so, like when you land in Jamaica and it's not on your dime, you're being sent there for your craft.
It was Kingston. I was not in some resort. So.
But you know what I mean? Like you're going to a foreign land based on your abilities. You're being sent there for your craft. Did that hit you?
No,
like,
I never even thought of it that way I never think of it that way.
Oh, we got to go back in time because the first time, anytime I was like the first time I was being sent to this day.
Yeah. When
I'm sent, you know, I have this gig coming up. I'm going to Rome. I've never been to Rome.
Oh, awesome.
And I get off the plane. I still have to like sit back and wow, this, you know, my craft brought me here.
Yeah, I guess there are times because there are places I wouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
It's not my job. And, you know, just different, even, you know, in America, different places and cities I would have never gone to. And I always try to, like, see a museum or whatever is, like, local there.
That's cool when you can do that. It's very important to be able to do that because I feel like if not, we start to forget, you know, that, hey, we're still living. We're still around. You know, we're not just here for the job.
Yeah, but you kind of feel like you're on a mission when you're sent somewhere on an assignment. And
I
like
do respect.
Gotta complete the mission.
Yeah, it's weird. I used to. I ran this video production company, and I got this great gig working for a Copyright Clearance Center, and basically any, I guess, textbook that puts a photo in it, you know, whatever you have to get clearance for that, you go through this multi-million-dollar company and they facilitate it or something. But they had this small little branch called Beyond the Book, and they just wanted to reach out to writers and publishers. So they would go from city to city. If they went to they would go to San Francisco and talk to the publisher of Wired and four other local writers. And my production company was hired to be the guys who shot it, so we would shoot and direct it.
Right.
So every time, you know, we're bouncing around the country for this. Basically, it's kind of a book TV show.
Oh, cool.
And once in a while, you know, I'd say 1 out of every 3 shows, I would find myself staying, you know, 1 or 2 more days. I do it now, you know, if it's the right. You know, I was in Hawaii for the first time last year and thought, you know, I'm going to take 3 days and look around. I think that's important.
Yeah. Now with like a little kid, it's harder to do. And I like try to make these like trips where I used to be like, I'll just stay an extra day. Now I'm like, can I fly in and out on the same day?
Do you have 1 or 2 or how?
One son, yeah.
And how old did you say?
4 years old, yeah.
So is he aware? Because my daughter was not thrilled about it, but okay with it. But somewhere around 6, it was the Hawaii trip because that was kind of a longer trip anyway. I had a lot of shows out there, and when I came back, she said, "Okay, you're not.
That's it.
You don't go anywhere without me. That's it." Right. And my wife went with for part of it.
Yeah.
But that was really what she said. You guys cannot both leave.
Right. This is not. I'm making a new rule here.
More. Yeah. So
some house rules.
She set the law, and to be honest, it's kind of sucks when you're a parent. Things do change.
Yeah.
Because there is that thing where 5 days in, I start missing my daughter, and I feel terrible.
Right, especially when he was really little, because like you're like, your life depends on me.
Yeah. Oh, the first year, I think the first year you can't go out to dinner without feeling like I'm the worst person in the world.
Failing you.
These 2 hours, this steak right now, I could be holding my daughter.
Yeah,
she's a baby.
I don't deserve this meal.
I'm just crying as I have another glass of wine.
And if you see another kid in the restaurant, forget it.
It's like, I'm terrible. Can I see the dessert menu?
I know.
Just give me the dessert.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a horrible feeling.
That. Yeah. Now he's a little more used, and you know, it's a trade-off because my job, it's not like it's 9 to 5 every day, and there's days where it's, I'm usually able to take them to school every morning. And,
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off. And then sometimes, like, if it's a longer trip and if it's somewhere cool and it fits into the schedule, like, I'll bring, like, my mom and him along, and then they know everybody in the hotel, and, like, everyone's, like, talking, and they're like, oh, that's Sally who does the, like, they know everyone in town, and by the time the trip's over.
Oh,
so
nice.
They love the hotel life.
I would imagine if you're covering games, then you have
Yeah.
a deadline. Most college games are happening on Saturdays, right?
Yeah, college football Saturdays, and
Yeah.
then college basketball is kind of like wherever and very late.
Oh,
games.
right, the college I was just thinking football,
Yeah.
but the college basketball
Yeah,
is
that's where it gets a
more.
little crazier. And
That's all over the
not much of a
place.
schedule, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
so then your deadlines are kind of all over the place.
Yeah, so like last night I got home at like 1:30 in the morning, and I stayed up to like work on something else till about like 3:30, and then
Yeah.
my son's up at 6.
Oh man, and you're not drinking coffee.
I know, right? Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I should start doing that.
I want to back up real quick
Yeah.
on the craft, because when you're when you head to college, you've done, I would imagine, the journalistic writing on a school paper. It's something,
Yeah.
but by the time you get to college, you just knew this is what I want. Did you want to do any other type of writing, or were you pretty much dead set, okay, journalistic writing, that's what I'm heading for?
Maybe in the beginning I might have thought about some different things, but once I started working at the school paper, I was like, oh, this is it. And like the papers
Laser
had
focus.
really, someone who was in my class like won a Pulitzer, and really good journalists have come out of there.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So for not being like a journalism school, it's not like Medill. It's just a run by college students, and it was a really good experience. So then I was like, this is what I definitely want to do,
So
because
here's
the
what I
people were
wanna-
really gung ho about it. Also.
Oh,
working
sure,
there,
you're
the
surrounded
students,
by
yeah.
that energy.
Yeah.
So here's what I want to know, because you have to figure out how to be entertaining and factual at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what fascinates me about journalistic writing. It's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
I've had people on the show who, whether it's songwriters or anything else, they have to do, they're just creating. And if the story doesn't seem, if the story seems like it's a little dull or it's a little slow moving, well, I'll add a dragon, because none of this is real.
I'm going to put a dragon in my next sports story. That will get readers.
So that's the thing. I mean, you have to take fact, but you have to now you have one small advantage over somebody who's maybe writing business articles or such, is there is a beauty to sports. There is something poetic about it.
Right.
And you can tap into that.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, was there a way you workshopped combining the creative with the factual when you started?
I think like part of it is just reading other people's work and just kind of studying it that way and seeing like, even your colleagues, like how you go about it. And just, a lot of it actually goes back to the interview too. Like, I think like that's where I get the more interesting things, because let's say so-and-so scores this many points. Okay. I can write about that and analyze it, but I find it more interesting to hear the person, explain why, that something happened in a game, or why, so that part, or, whatever that player's going through, or something more personal. And I feel like that's kind of the draw, especially nowadays. It's changing with journalism, sports journalism, because like by the time you would get your paper in the morning, if you care about a game, you're going to know about it. Like you see it on Sports Center, or you've checked your phone, or, you have apps that cover the game, that air the games. So you're going to know about it. So now it's like, for me to sit there and write play-by-play of a game would be pointless, so you've got to try to find a different angle or put some perspective to it.
How do you do it? I mean, especially when you're not dealing with as many interviews, because you can't, I mean, do you interview somebody every game?
Yeah. So, I mean, the challenge is it's such a time crunch. Like, you don't have the luxury to like think about what you're writing almost.
Yeah.
Because you just got to get it done.
Yet you need, at the very least, you need that first line.
Yeah. That's kind of my thing. It's my holdup always. It's like, once I get what they call a lead, like your first opening line, then I'm like, okay, I can go. If I get held up on that, I'm like, oh no. But so that's kind of the process there. But you're on deadline, so it's like whatever my best idea is, that's what I've got to go with, because I've got like 5 minutes to finish this. So.
I mean, how do you go about when? So here's what I want to know: when you have a story, there's maybe either no interview attached to it or no good interview attached to it.
Which is often the case.
And it's a boring game.
Yeah.
What do you do?
That's challenging. I think that's more when you go into some analysis.
There's a dragon.
Yeah, that's when you put in the dragon and these fires that erupted and volcanoes.
Yeah, what do you do in that scenario?
Yeah, I'm not saying like every article is like knocked out of the park.
Oh, sure,
right?
but I mean...
So, yeah, but you've got to find a way to get it done.
Yeah.
And, I think, that's where having knowledge of what you've covered helps, because you'll see like, here's some trends. And, I remember this happened, or I remember in this game, this exact situation happened before, and the team this time knew how to adjust to that or didn't.
Oh, nice.
So, I think just having knowledge of what you have to be kind of an expert on whatever topic you're covering. Even, take it beyond sports, but just journalism in general. Like, you could be covering, like talking to a pilot one day, or, an astronaut, and the next day you're talking to a chef, or, so you've got to be versatile. Same with sports. Like, they'll throw me on hockey, which I, don't cover year round and don't have a lot of experience with. And I've got to like catch up with the Blackhawks are in the playoffs and kind of try to find like unique angles or just survive and do it.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, it's kind of like you're always on your feet and you've got to be versatile and think about things, but it helps to try to be a little bit of an expert on everything.
So when you get thrown into a situation like that, like you get thrown, into the Blackhawks all of a sudden, and hockey's not always your forte.
Right.
What are you doing? Are you kind of doing
panicking? No.
Oh my God! If only there were a dragon somewhere. Right. Do you find yourself doing a little bit of research?
Oh, yeah. Like, that's the other thing you asked about is, just about the process. Like, research is like where I spend like most of my day doing, besides like the interviews and writing. Like, that's a main thing. Like, I always tell journalism students too when I talk to them, it's just like you have to do a ton of research before you talk to somebody, or go somewhere to do a story or cover a team you're not used to covering. So to kind of make yourself at least seem like an expert, because especially in a town like Chicago, where like you could pick anybody on the streets and could probably tell you like every single thing about the Cubs or of the Bears, whatever. Like, everyone thinks they're definitely an expert and knows more than anybody who's covering these teams. And a lot of people are like, they're like very obsessed with their teams. And so that's where you've got to be. It's a good thing, because you've got to really be on your toes about
that. Must be tricky for somebody who comes to a big town or a sports town fresh, and when you're coming in fresh and you don't know the backlog and you don't know all the history, and you're surrounded by these maniacs.
I think that's where like working in Philadelphia is like a tough town. Like right away I'm like, okay, I gotta like buckle up here, because like
really?
No one's holding your hand. Like, the other writers were just terrific to me, but just like it's a great town, but it's like a tough town. They do not let you off the hook, and they're gonna like hold your feet to the fire, and you just get thrown into things, and the fans will call you out on something, so it's very, it's tough. It's a tough town.
I want to delve into the world then, because I'm sure it's changed so much, just the landscape of your job. When you get to Philadelphia and you get to the Enquirer, what's that like? You report to the office. Yeah. And your first month reporting to the office. I mean, what is this? What is it? You walk in, and then what? Because again, all I have to go on, and all I think most people have to go on is just the movies.
Yeah,
we got the story. See, it's gonna break. See, we got Chief. You got to send me.
Immediately change your voice to like a 1940s style. And start smoking cigars. And
I think of like His Girl Friday or something.
Yeah.
So when you get there, you walk in. And what's happening?
I think my...
or you know what? Forget that. Try to remember your first day.
Oh my gosh, that's a really hard.
Do you remember that?
Well, you know what? I do remember like one of my first assignments was like pretty rough.
But I want to hear about the landscape.
Well, going in the office, that's changed a lot, because now like newsrooms are sadly like a little bit of ghost towns.
That's what I'm curious about.
It's
so
not
I want
like
to know
that clatter.
What was it? Was it still? Was the clatter
still there? It was more a little bit. It was like the tail end of the clatter era. Okay. We'll call it.
So it was still. There were still
human beings in the office, and some coming and going, and
a lot of phone calls, a lot of phones ringing, and
but not like it used to be, because so much is like emailing and and now like I'm hardly ever in the office because I'm traveling or I can work from home. It's like, everyone's remote. So, but when I first started, yeah, you would go into the office more, but I also had
Did you
like
ever
a
write
laptop
often were there still people writing in the
there
office?
There are people
at their
who do
desks?
that, but
were there
fewer.
more back
Yeah.
then?
Yeah,
There-
probably. Yeah,
It was
but
happening.
now it's
Did you do it ever? Were you writing?
sometimes. But
stories?
sports is a totally different animal because like you don't have time to like get back after a game to write a story. And then like features, I might interview someone for a feature at like 8 a.m, and then the next person I need to interview is at 9 p.m. So I can't I'm not going to sit in the office for like 20 hours waiting for a couple phone calls. So, you've kind of got to like,
So
you can be a little more flexible.
So today, yeah, that's true because I mean there was a time during a certain era where a reporter would be in the office, they'd have to turn over their copy right to whoever so it could go to print.
Yeah.
Where now everything can be emailed.
Yeah,
everything's
I
digital.
email everything.
And you don't have to sit at your phone and be on the phone. I mean, you have cell phones. Everything's changed from like, not that you were making it sound like you were a reporter in 1945 or so. Yeah.
my start.
But it's interesting because when you say ghost town, that's right. If I were to walk into the Chicago Tribune,
Yeah.
it's
It's
such a big
mostly
town.
editors in there, right?
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, how? I mean, do they even? My God, do they even rent out the same office space? Or?
Yeah, I mean that's getting less and less too. But
So you walk in, and what are you seeing then? Editors, what are the editors even doing? They're just manning everything.
And going over what you send in and making sure it's accurate.
Is it an editor's job to not only go over the work, but also kind of put together the template of a page?
So we'll have like a sports editor who, he's managing the department and overseeing everything and maybe getting into some design and what's gonna a
little bit of what the page
so they
will
call
actually
it like the budget and how much space each person gets, because a lot of what I'm doing is like writing for space, like fill 20 inches of a story. So I've got to write to like, okay, I have so much more to say. Or sometimes I'm like, oh.
So will they tell you that? Will they say we need
like
this
every
much? Mm-hmm. And then will they say like 20 inches and you're like, all right, I know how many words.
You kind of just have a feel. You get a feel for it, and But but there's sometimes if it's a bigger like a feature story, I'm always the type like, can I have 50 inches? And they're like, can you do 30? And I'm like, okay. And then I sit in and I'm like, oh, sorry, that's 5 inches over. But
then are they sending you the stuff back, or are they just shortening things on their own?
Yeah, they just do it on their own. Maybe something like for a bigger story, like a really bigger project, or you're investigating something, then you're going to have like a lot more back and forth and going over the story a bunch, and like, maybe even there's some stories I've worked on where like, legal people in our office have to look at it to make sure, we're not going to get sued.
Oh, sure.
So for
in the
bigger
world of
stories,
sports, what would they be looking at? I mean,
for something like that?
Yeah.
Well, so like last year, the University of Illinois had a football coach who eventually got fired because he was like mistreating players and not handling their injuries correctly, and kind of allegedly telling them to play, despite being injured and things like that. So, this other reporter worked on it together, and we called like everybody on the Illinois roster who'd ever played for this coach and tried to contact every single one of them. So that took up like my whole summer. And, but you want to make sure that like you're accurate and that, everything's like definitely fact checked, and editors will have different questions for you. So so bigger things, but most of the time I'm like sending something in like a panic, hoping I get it in time, and like there it's done, and and they change a few things and put it in the paper.
That kills me more than anything because certain authors have deadlines, but those deadlines are so long. Yeah. And the only time an author panics is when they procrastinate. Well, but even if you do procrastinate, sometimes your turnaround has to be pretty quick still, though.
Right. Like that for a project like that.
That's different. That's
different. Like that, I had a lot of time to work on.
But when you're reporting a game,
it's like minute by. There's times where I have to send in a game story before everyone has to do this before a game's over, and you just like leave the spot for them to fill in like the score, and maybe a few stats, like top player stats.
So if you're doing if you're reporting on a basketball game, and. So at what point are you sent, like before 2 minutes?
They'll give me a time, like at 9:00, send this in. And I'm like, well, there's like...
What if the game's going till 10?
It does, yeah. So you kind of have to be a little general. And then, so take, for instance, a lot of times if it's an important game, they hold the paper.
Okay.
And they'll say, like, this is so important. We want to make sure.
Because it has to, again, I'm forgetting, it actually has to go to print.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
man.
Right. So, but then, but then we also, so maybe the first story I send in is going to be like more general. And then like you have a second edition. So there's different deadlines for the paper. So then I get like another crack at it kind of.
When you say so morning edition, is that like?
No, so like you'll have,
work?
It's more now about like where it's circulated. So the truck has to leave at us earlier to take a paper out to some far suburb or, or ship it somewhere really far. So that story is probably going to be the worst one.
And that'll be different from something that's delivered.
Yeah. So then you have a later edition, and then that's where, I'll have a little more time to like interview a coach.
Has it always been like that? That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is
they used to have way more editions.
Sure.
So.
Oh, wow. So you'll get different drafts. I wonder how long the whole process takes to print one edition and then print another.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're like pretty quick at it now. But like for instance, like the other thing too is sometimes like last year's NCAA championship game between Villanova and North Carolina, it was like just it was a last second shot that won the game. And like, I have to send a story the second the game is over. So you have like two stories. You're working on like two different, at least for me, like you have two different leads going and like two different Word documents of like, I'm kind of trying to piece it together. And then it's like a last second shot. And you're like, how could you do this to me? Yeah. But, or, you see games where it's like, it keeps going to overtime and you're like, oh, why?
So what happened? Yeah. I mean, so you hit your deadline, even if it's at halftime, but then you're staying for the whole game. And then if there is something like that, last second shot, you're writing that in, but then you don't even know what edition that's going to make. As far as print goes, you don't know if that'll even make it to print.
It will, yeah.
It will.
But now too, they they'll I send it in so that they have time to edit it, and then they just like plug a score in, and then poof, they send it away and put it in paper. And then the later edition, you have like maybe an extra half hour to like, or maybe sometimes an hour to.
So there's an editor that is on staff, like at the Tribune, till like midnight or whatever, because he's making those little changes for each different story.
Yeah.
See, this is stuff I've never even heard of. I don't know if many people know.
And sports is always the latest, because we have late games and late,
absolutely.
and so it's kind of funny because in news it's always like on election night it's like a big deal that they worked on deadline. But it's like it's very important. But
we do this all the time.
So you just you get used to like. Yeah,
it's kind of cool and refreshing to know that there's still some aspect of it that's still like, we gotta hit this deadline. See, we're going to print. See,
right?
So
it is. It's the same feel, I guess. You know what's funny is like in the older, like when I started, even I graduated college in 2000, and the you had to like find your laptop, find a like phone line cord to send it. And when I was covering high school games, I was like sending from like janitor's closets. I had to like once like climb. For some reason, this high school had like the phone jack at like this on the ceiling almost. I'm like, what? I found like a ladder in this janitor's closet and like on deadline, like climbed up it and connected. I'm like, oh my God, it works. Yes.
So this would be like a faxing thing, or how would?
Yeah, like you would send. How like it used to be like to get an internet connection, you had to have like, the phone jack. Yeah, and then these like people want to like shut the school, and you're like, just give me 5 more minutes.
That's
please.
amazing.
So I climb this ladder to send it.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. But the guys before that, they had like these old, I can't think of the name of it. I'm kicking myself. I can't. But it was like this big machine, and you had to like put like the phone on it, and just like the slightest vibration would set it off, and they'd like have to try to send again. And it was
I remember that. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called either. Oh my, see that? We're already forgetting.
Right.
But that's right. You had to put the phone in this certain
and that
thing.
was before I started. But those guys like have some interesting stories about it. And there was times like I had to just like call it in and kind of like dictate over the phone.
And somebody's who's doing that?
An editor is just like typing what you say, and they're like, that's a lot of pressure. That hardly ever happens, especially nowadays.
If you did anything like that, did you have something written and you're reading it off, or are you kind of making some stuff off the cuff?
I mean, I only had to do that a couple times. And now you just like, I've like written things in my car on my phone to send in when it's like, I'm traveling. And
you've written on your phone?
I've had to, just like a story breaks, and you're like, you've got it now, it's 24 hours a day. So, you hear some news that someone's fired, or, someone breaks their leg. So I'm like, let me pull over and type something fast, email it in, and
I think this is awesome. I think you're very cool. Seriously,
you're the only person to ever say that.
When we first started talking, I was just because this is your career and being able to examine your career in a different way, in this way. It's just an animal that I have not seen in other interviews or chats or anything. I just don't.
Yeah.
I was stumbling over myself. I was the worst. I was the worst speaker to a professional interviewer. I was just like,
Not at all.
and we're gonna, because I was so. I'm just fascinated by unpacking this. It's cool
a unique
to me.
yeah, I forget. It is a unique, very unique
Incredibly
type of job.
unique.
And just like even like I have most of my friends are like normal human beings.
Yeah.
Who like go to work
9
at
to
normal
5ers.
days.
Sure.
And like, yeah, I'm like, oh, you're normal.
There's
That's
something
nice.
adventurous about it still.
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, there's something still like a little different and exciting about it. And every day is different. And
You said, and I can't remember if I mentioned this when we first started talking, but you said, I feel weird being on the podcast because you have artists on, but you are such an artist, and this is what fascinates me, and it's kind of refreshing to know that this, the fast-paced part of it's still happening because time's changing, and when things become digital, and print is a weird thing, we don't know what's going to happen with print in another 10 years or whatever it is, but the fact that you have to create your art, you have to craft on demand, I mean, it's just more hype, it's a higher pressure than anything else as far as creating and writing, especially, maybe on a movie set, some big star gets really angry and says, "We'll change that page for the producers by tonight," or whatever. Yeah, that's something. But not only do you have to do this for an entire, an event that means so much to so many people, but you have to do it consistently. That's crazy.
Day after day.
There's a whole different brain that you have to have just for that, and temperament, and maybe a little bit of insanity.
Sports writers don't have the best temperament.
Well, that's another thing. Yeah, I mean,
but,
when you say they're the old guys getting. Well, yeah, tell me about that. By the
I
way.
wasn't there when this happened. This was after me, but I was just describing to you about kind of the Philadelphia sports writing scene. I mean, these guys are the best. Like, I owe them everything because they really took me under their wing, and they're just like these
old timers.
Some of them, and some weren't. But they just, oh man, like just crass jokes. But it's like that kind of like humor. I don't know that newspapers have.
Smoking a bunch of cigarettes.
There's some drinking. I'll say, but I used to cover the Eagles, and I was like the Philadelphia Eagles, and and with the
that's huge.
Inquirer, who there were other beat writers. I was like the second one on that, and so you go on the road, and I was like, 24 years old, and like I'm with all these older sports guys, and they're like, "Do you ever think anyone's just like, what is she doing with hanging?" Because there aren't many women still that do this.
Yeah.
There's more now, but
what was it
was
like
just
covering a major sports team like that? Like that, that's a major sports team.
Yeah,
you were on the road with them?
Yeah, so I would travel with them.
So when you first get that assignment and you're going to be covering the Eagles, was that the biggest thing you?
For sure,
Okay.
yeah. Because I'd been doing high schools before that, so.
You went from high school right to the Eagles, basically?
Yeah, basically. Like I did some features, sports features, and kind of general assignment they call it, where you're doing a little bit of everything. Yeah.
So here's what nobody hears about this. Like, what is that like? I mean, okay? Let's talk about a home game first.
Yeah.
So you have a home game. It's the Eagles. Mm-hmm. What is life like? When does your adventure start? The day before the game, the week of the game.
You're there every day covering practices.
You're there every day.
So you're there every day. There's practice. You're there, kind of trying to come up with like a storyline or looking ahead to the game.
How does that work? Okay, let's take you to you're in the middle of the practice week.
Yeah.
You're watching, and then what are you trying to create? What are you trying to get from the practice?
Right. So a lot of it is kind of looking at what's coming up, who's playing, who played well, sometimes a guy on a team is going to play his form. So when I covered the Eagles, it was Terrell Owens, who was a wide receiver, who was just pretty unique guy, pretty crazy. I actually really like covering it. Like almost everyone hated covering him, but I was like, he's fascinating and he's crazy. It's the best thing. Like you don't have to prepare at all. You walk into the press conference and he's just like talking trash to someone like you didn't even know he had any beef with. You're like, oh, okay, you hate that guy.
The thing about dragons.
Yeah, right. It always goes back to dragons. So it was crazy. It was just, they were really good. They went to the Super Bowl one year. So you're just looking at different, and there's other people from your paper also covering it. There's usually another like 2 beat writer, like the Tribune. We have like almost everyone covers the Bears. We have like so many Bears writers, but and also like columnists who will go to a game and write an opinion on it. So you're kind of trying to figure out who's doing what off of.
That's another thing. Yeah. So there or a few writers for the Eagles. So then once you're in that and you're doing it, how do you decide, okay, I've got this part of the story. Here's what I'll cover. How did that
I was the young one. So yeah, I mean, like I said, the people I worked with were just awesome and really helped me a lot. And I was definitely young, so I'm like, well, whatever, I'm going to do the, whatever you need me to do type of thing. But
so it's like at the end of the day, you're meeting at a coffee shop, like, all right, I've got the blah, 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 and I've got the sex scandal, and I've got the injured knee, and I've got, like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you usually like work right there, like most sports teams have like a media room, and then so you're kind of working at the facility right after, so like you don't even really have much time to like go anywhere else because you've got to write these things pretty quickly. Because you don't want to write
about the same thing unless I guess, well, let's do that first. You don't want to write about the same thing, so there's just communication and
so you find there's always like a million different stories.
But then there's also a situation where maybe two people have to write about the same thing but with a different slant on it. Is that
sometimes, especially like if something's if there's like a certain player who's like really dynamic, I mean, how many stories about Jay Cutler have been written? Like 9 million. Like you could write about Jay Cutler, what he had for breakfast, and it would be like our most read story in the whole paper. It really would be. It would be like Jay Cutler wore a red shirt today. Like everyone in Chicago would read it. It wouldn't matter.
That is so cool.
It's
That's
true.
crazy.
It's a little
sports,
strange.
Man. It's sports.
Yeah, I want to be like, you turn the page and find something more important on that one. But there's people just follow it religiously. So, there's definitely players who like you just can't write enough about.
We're nuts, and we want them to win so badly.
Yeah, it's
that
a little
every
strange.
little nugget of information, we want it all. Like, oh, okay, well, and then they're watching the game, you're thinking, oh, you probably just because you wore that red shirt, it irritated them.
The Wheaties instead of the eggs.
But I'm glad I know that. I'm glad I read that story. It's so much more important than the huge story on the flip side.
So there's always, I mean, especially a sport like football. Now where I'm covering college sports, and I'm pretty much the only person covering a team, so I have like a lot of freedom to write. But when you're on a team,
so that helps. College sports, is it all teams? So I mean, how many teams do you cover?
Well, I cover right now mostly the University of Illinois, but then I'll do some features on different ththings, like different athletes who are there's a player.
I want to go back to Philly though. Okay, we're not done with Philly yet.
Everyone who knows me is like, oh my gosh, he talks about Philly all the time. No, I loved it there, but
I want to run up the Rocky stairs right now and just like look over your career. That's what we're doing. So okay, that's the home game. Now, when it was an away game.
Yeah.
How does that work? Are you on a bus with players? Or
no, you do it like separately because again, like the objectivity, you don't ever want to you can't like accept any type of like give. You have to have like a very clear line between like you and the players.
So you're jumping on a plane.
Yes,
usually?
you fly right to the city that you go into. Mm-hmm.
And then once you arrive, you just head right to.
Yeah, it depends. Like the day before a game. I mean, usually like the game days are the most like. For me, it's like that's the easy part almost because it's the week before you're trying to come up with story ideas and like, making sure you didn't miss like something, someone's not going to play or someone's getting traded or somebody's, I don't know, got arrested, something crazy. You don't want to miss any of that. So then the game day, you kind of like, okay, you're just covering that part of it. And there's like a little. But then it's the deadline pressure, but it's not the other pressure of like, am I missing any news type of pressure?
So you're always getting there around like the day before?
Sometimes the day before. Okay. If it's a late game, you'll get there the day of, or like a Monday night game, you could get there that day.
But it's so cool. You get there, and then you go right to the stadium, and that's where the press room is.
Go to your hotel, then probably go to the stadium. And
where do you get your press pass from?
At the stadium, and you go
at the stadium,
right, and then you just kind of head to the press box, and you get there.
Oh, come on! And yet it feels so important.
I mean, when I started, that's like really intimidating. Cause, all these people like have definitely done it way longer than you and know everything you could possibly know about it. So, I think it was like more intimidating, and then you just get used to it.
Did you have to do a lot of locker room interviews? Or not often?
So definitely.
And that whole thing fascinates the heck out of me because, especially if you're, you're the opposite sex.
Right.
So it really is just naked dudes walking around, and you're supposed to focus on this guy as he's sitting there and he's talking, and maybe he's naked too. Like, is it ever I don't care?
It's interesting because there's such a misconception of what happens there.
Yeah.
So definitely. women who started doing this a long time ago went through hell. Like, people really harassed them. Players harassed them.
Yeah.
Like, they were not allowed, like, just, would get death threats. And, like,
God.
they were told, like, you can't come into the locker room, but all the male reporters go into the locker room to get interviews.
Sure.
And you're going to get it after. So, that puts you in a worse situation for, your deadline, and you're not going to get the same information. And some guys don't even want you to be there. So they paved the road. Like, it's so much. I mean, now it's, not anything like that, but you still have some incidents. But then, now it's to the point, players know when you're coming. They know when the locker room's open to the media. So, like, if they're naked, it's because, like, they want to be.
Okay, so they have
they
time.
know, like, hardly, everyone, like, will put a towel, but they are rushed, especially, like, if they're on the road and they're getting, but you're rushed too. Like, I'm like, I don't care. Like, you could be, like, doing anything right now. Like, it would not faze me. I just need a quote and get out of here.
Yeah,
like,
but you're a player. You have a little bit of time to get to the locker room. And
definitely. They have, like, this
us.
cooling off period, the NBA too. They have a period where, they can shower before they let us in. It's not like, we just come in right away with the team.
I just figure, like, they're walking in, they're getting undressed, and then you're just running right in.
Like, they have, like, this period, and you've got to wait, and it's, you wait for them to open the locker room to the media, and they know the time period. So, and most of the guys now are definitely, they've been interviewed by women, and they've seen women on TV and as sportscasters.
So they're respectable to the whole.
So they know, like, it's not that big of a deal. It's always, like, a much bigger deal to fans than it is to like actually players.
Well, it almost sounds
us.
comical.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been humorized in
it's
in movies and
right.
stuff.
It is, like, really annoying because, like, every movie about, like, a woman as a sports writer is, like, falling in love with the
not
guy,
only that,
or
I just feel like
something scandalous.
Or just the joke of whatever, it's an old movie, Steel Magnolias, I think. There's a scene where the lady's in the locker room, and it's just, you see, like, just the bare butts and everything around her.
There definitely are guys, who are doing that, but it's just in such a way that it's not,
you've got to get
there
to
are
the
guys who, there are still people who are not fully evolved in their thinking. And, and even when I was in Philadelphia, there was a radio guy who, there were only 3 women in Philadelphia who were covering the Eagles from, different outlets. And, he went on the radio and was like, these women, they just come in here to look at the guys. Wow. So I'm like, when you say that, you're basically naming us because everyone knows who the women in town are. I'm like, so you're basically saying our name. And I'm like, we do not. And plus, as there's definitely a big double standard still for women in sports writing that, you have to make. It's not right, but it's the reality that you're judged differently. If you make a mistake, it's because you're an idiot and you obviously don't know about sports because you're a woman.
Wow.
Rather than just like, or,
but Joe Schmo writer can make the same mistake.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's still this idea that, you're doing it because you're trying to get an athlete, you're attracted to an athlete, or you're,
That's
instead
still
of like
a thing.
Definitely. Like, if you want to read my emails, I get that a lot. Like, that's why you have this job. So that it's, it's worse among the fans than it is, or readers, than it is the actual people in the profession or the athletes.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, but there are, every once in a while the topic will come up again. It's like, women have been in the locker room for a long time, but there's still like, I'm never going to, like, look down when I'm in the locker room. I'm always, like, very conscientious of, like, where I'm looking. I, never drop my pen. Like, I'm very, like, you're very attuned to, like, what you're, because people are.
So if you drop it, you're just like,
I'm like, okay, does anybody else have a pen?
Just keep talking. I'll remember what you say. I've got it up here.
I've got my tape recorder.
Well,
you're conscientious all the time about that because, there are people who are, like, still, even though I say everyone's used to it, and now I'm not covering the NFL like I used to, but people are looking at you to see if you're looking. So you're always like,
oh my God, of course. People are looking,
and like it's so much less than, I don't want to like over dramatize because it's so much less than it used to be, and people are used to it, and everyone's in there for the most part very professional and doing their job.
That is so funny because I run into that when there was a time where I didn't think twice about it. When I was on stage singing, if, this very attractive girl would be on the dance floor, and you're just looking at this girl. And there was one show in particular where this gorgeous girl, this sexy girl was dancing on the dance floor. I'm singing, and I just couldn't help but stare at this girl. And I looked over, and one of my bandmates, and this was years ago, and, so it's not in my current band, if you guys are wondering. But anyway, this was years ago, and a person I was working with was just locked on her, gawking while playing. And I thought, oh, that looks crazy, almost gross.
You're like, you're being creepy right now.
And that changed everything.
Yeah.
So now I can't, I kind of scan the room. It's almost a blank scan, but I never look.
Yeah.
I'm even uncomfortable if my wife is on the dance floor and she's very attractive.
Yeah.
I won't even look at her. I just feel like.
That's interesting because you want to connect with your audience. For you, that's very important.
And I'll make eye contact with certain people, but I will never, if a person has, maybe a rear end that looks like the gods chiseled it, I won't look at that rear end. I can't because I feel like all
everybody's
eyes are
watching
on me.
you. Yeah,
and
definitely.
that one little moment. I think little moments on stage become magnified, so I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, right.
I'm almost uncomfortable if somebody too hot is
You're like, you have to leave.
I'm looking just around, just over their shoulders. Yeah, so that I can relate to that. Wow, how interesting. You don't realize where certain worlds connect.
Yeah,
but that's the thing.
It is interesting.
You would just think that. For myself, I don't care if I were in the greatest shape of my life, just to be respectful and just embarrassed. You don't want to just be walking around and flopping and whatever,
Right.
Or you would even think nobody wants anybody to see that linebacker who's like, oh darn it, I don't want them to know that the kicker is way more well endowed than I am. I better cover up fast. Somebody hand me my helmet. But besides that,
my good friend who's a sports reporter, she always says the locker room is the least sexy or last place you would ever even think about sex. It's sweaty, smelly, disgusting. There's a million people in there, all jostling. You're in a panic about trying to make your deadline.
Something that nobody has probably ever asked you about or thinks about. But these are, some of the greatest athletes in the world that are in this room, and they've been doing such spectacular things at such a high level that the BO must be just on a national level.
Hockey is definitely the worst, where you're just I need
they're
a mask.
Up, so when they take off, it's
just horrendous. Yeah, and it's just a smell you can't even describe. It's just and you're trapped in it.
Are there tricks? Do you have anything? No.
No,
just
you just gotta deal with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and and then there's all these, especially if it's a big game, and there's national media. If it's the Stanley Cup Finals, there are so many people crammed. There's way more reporters than athletes in the room.
Yeah.
So you're bumping elbows, getting in the head with
BO
cameras, and
stuck.
just a million people in this hot little room. It's you're not thinking about who's hot in here. You're this is horrible and disgusting, and I want out.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So the away games, it doesn't sound that much different because once you're getting to the game.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And nowadays, how are you finding your angles these days? Because now you've been in it for a while, especially basketball. I'm fascinated by that because of the sheer number of games you have to cover. Right. You probably have one or two go-tos that you're able to use, I'd imagine, but then you don't want to repeat yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I always sometimes I'll hold back on a story. I'm I'm going to use the feature on this guy. And then he gets hurt or he doesn't play as well. And I'm I should use that. But, or, you're I never got around to writing about him because I waited so long. But
wow.
Yeah. There's definitely, you try to find different ways to go about it and find different, we said, the different angles, whether it's someone playing well or not. And lately I've been doing a lot more columns and kind of writing more about, which I'm way more interested in now, is just kind of writing about sports and politics or sports and race and sports and gender, because I think sports completely mirrors our society.
It does.
In a lot of ways.
When you say sports and politics,
Well, Colin Kaepernick, for instance, a lot of the players, some of the Patriots players don't want to go to the White House. So that's a story politically, and players it's kind of like the 1960s where players are a lot more into activism now and speaking up about issues. You see a lot of things that mirror our society as far as how female athletes are treated and not paid as well, or and how, just kind of this evolution of gay athletes coming out and how they're accepted. It's goes right along with how our society going. It's really interesting. I talked last year to Harry Edwards, who was he kind of was behind the Mexico City Olympics, fist in the air, Tommy Smith, and but he was talking to me about that, just how, because I said, it's interesting, like in the 60s, everyone was like real, these athletes were so outspoken. And then in the 90s, like people were pretty quiet. And Michael Jordan had that quote about like, well, Republicans buy my shoes. So like, I don't care. Cause like, I'm going to sell my, and now again, you see athletes like LeBron James and, Carmelo Anthony, a lot, Dwayne Wade, speaking up about issues they care about again. So I was like, what's that? And he's like, well, that's because like, there's a lot of activism in the 60s and there's a lot of activism now in society, and sports kind of goes along with what people care. These are human beings too that are affected by issues. So anyway, so I've kind of gotten more into that because I think it's an interest, and it's, like we said, the idea of writing about just here's who won a game and here's who didn't win a game.
Yeah.
Isn't so interesting to me anymore because of just kind of the nature of the business. And I don't know, there's more important things going on in the world too. So
it's cool that you're
trying
allowed
to find ways to look at things differently like that.
It's cool that you're allowed to go there.
Yeah. I think it's been encouraged, I guess. Yeah.
Has it really?
Yeah. I mean, I think just trying to find different ways to look at stories.
I think that's pretty cool because that it really changes the nature of what people think you're supposed to cover.
Yeah.
You would almost feel like when it gets into a realm that becomes a little more interpersonal or political or whatever, that, we're going to turn this over to this writer.
Yeah, so there's like
you wouldn't
definitely
expect
a line.
a sports writer to still be delving into that area.
But we should have a long time ago, because in the when baseball was being integrated, sports pages like for white newspapers, they had like black-owned newspapers. They're the ones who covered Jackie Robinson. White-owned newspapers like almost ignored it.
Wow.
Like stupid. That was a story, you know, and just so so there was some bias there actually because of like who was writing the stories. So that's like the importance of like newspapers and journalism in general should be more diverse than it is. Sports journalism is like almost all still white men, so it like almost hasn't changed at all over like many decades.
Crazy! That's strange. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's odd, but so it's, I don't know. It's just, it's interesting. Like I feel like we should learn from like how we used to cover things in like not such a great way to like actually writing about what these athletes maybe are going through, or just like the women in pay thing, for instance. Or I wrote about like lesbian coaches who there's this stereotype like every woman who plays a sport is gay, and they have to kind of confront that. But then also it's still harder for them to come out because of being a woman in sports, and you don't have as a coach, and you're not as high profile. You kind of got to keep your job and be in this like safe little realm, and so like they face like these different challenges for that. So there's like a lot of stories out there like that.
So
I think
cool.
we should be doing more of that.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully I can keep finding interesting stories like that. But
I think that's great because it goes back to what you were saying. I mean, if an athlete or a team is loved enough, people gravitate toward whatever. Oh, they're putting sugar on their grapefruit for lunch. Then obviously they're going to read this stuff as well.
Right. Some people really don't like it. They're like the whole stick to sports thing, and but I'm like, this is the world, this is like they're human beings too.
Tightrope act for you though.
Yeah, it is, because you don't want to, there's definitely times like now I'll write some columns, which, you can have an opinion, but at the same time, like, you do want to like walk a line and you don't want to cross it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Yeah. Sometimes, or you have to kind of keep checking yourself and making sure you're not.
You have to, because you're dealing with a fan base.
Yeah.
And if you tick that entire group off, then all of a sudden that does affect, whatever readers or subscribers.
It's hard to know, because like if you went by my emails, like everyone hates me because those are the people who are emailing, because it's a vocal minority. It's like the comment section under like never read the comment section under any articles, because it's just like filled with like, you're like, oh my God, these people are out there, like,
and that's it,
crazy.
Though. That's it, because obviously you're still being read and they're still reading you, but it's like social media. It's just like Facebook.
Right.
So somebody who puts up a political rant or something, the only people that respond are the people that are against it, and they're the only one. Because if you like it, I mean, if I have a tasty brownie, I'm just gonna say,
Yeah. I mean, I do get, I'll get
Yeah.
positive ones for sure too. But there, I always say like, someone's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna think about that. That might be a good point. Like, you're not gonna like be writing the person to say like, oh, I'm gonna consider this now, or So,
I mean, nobody, people don't want to take the initiative as much when it's something.
Yeah,
they
like
enjoy.
if you're just thinking, you're like, if
They
you're
just
really
wanna
fired
sit-
up about it one
yeah.
side or the other, you're gonna like.
If you enjoy it, I think you just want to sit back and keep getting it.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah.
fine. And
Yeah.
you almost feel safer. Like, I'm not going to say a thing.
Right.
I don't want to adjust this thing. I just,
But the people who write me who are angry, it's always though about my gender. It's always like,
is it really? That's interesting.
Most of the time,
Yeah.
it's like, why aren't you baking cookies? Like, you should be in the kitchen. Like, literally,
That
like you should
still
be in the
goes
kitchen.
on? That is so
I'm like,
terrible.
I'm like, this is like must have been from like the 1950s. I don't know. And sometimes I do get like the handwritten letters are like the most disturbing because it's like cutouts and like very vulgar, horrible things written to me.
Goofy.
But that's just, you have thick skin doing this. It really
and
doesn't.
you're doing it in a big market.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
maybe
that's-
that draws in more.
Way more crazies, for sure.
But you figure there's good and bad. There's always going to be that. And
Yeah.
in the old days they were calling the paper to yell at you, and now
Well,
I'd rather
have
get
you-
an email.
Wait, back in the old days they would.
They'd
Sure.
call, they'd call
Listen
up
here,
and yell.
toots.
Luckily, I got a toots recently.
No!
Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh, I actually like enjoy. I was like, that's awesome. Like,
Was this a letter? Was this in person?
It was an email. Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like a relic. You're still like the sexist relic who calls women toots. That's amazing. I didn't know you were still around. Let's talk about this.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's a story right there.
Yeah, no, some of them I'm just like, oh, this is so entertaining. You're just like,
Toots.
it's not good, but you're just like that. It's laughable because it's like, this idea of like, you should have more kids and be in the kitchen and you leave this to the men, like literally, I'm like, oh my gosh,
It's a new
you're still
world,
out
man.
there.
And I don't want to get on any type of soapbox or anything, but I do think women are, boy, now I'm going to get emails, but I think women are better at so many things than guys. For some reason, I think when you guys focus, you have more of a laser focus.
Well, what's interesting in this job is, I think people like to say like, oh, your gender doesn't make a difference. But I think sometimes it does because, someone's going to open up to you. You might be interviewing an athlete and like, oh, he loves music too.
Yeah.
You can connect in that way. Or, with me, just because of the way people think about women, that he might feel more comfortable with me and say something. And at the same time, they might be more defensive. There's just people feed off you in different ways. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And, sometimes, you talk about parenting with a coach and that kind of, opens them up to something. Or, there's just different things you can relate to. Or
That is fascinating, what you're tapping into because you are so dead on. I mean, for you to be a sports writer and people to say, well, you're not going to get the same story or, things are going to be altered the wrong way. No one's going to want to talk to you. Yeah. That is so dead wrong. Most of my dear friends, I probably have more female friends than male. And if I were to unpack that, it's because my parents were divorced. I still saw my dad, but I was friends and very close to my mom. Yeah. And that was, my best friend growing up. And I think because of that, I'm more comfortable speaking to a woman, then maybe I'm overly sensitive in a way because I was able to open up more.
Yeah,
where my dad wouldn't take that at all.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think, the athlete that was raised by his mom or the athlete that has 5 sisters and no brothers is going to be able to talk to a female reporter a little more easily. He may not even realize it, but that's out there. That's true. That's
like
true.
I said, I think sometimes it's like, they're so used to us and they just see us as a reporter. But there's some of these stories where you're like really trying to get to know somebody, or even like a lot of our job is like developing sources for stories so that, you get a scoop on something. So like relating to people in different ways and everybody, whatever you've got, you I don't want to say you use that, but you connect with people in different ways because of who you are. And so, sometimes it's not even about being a woman. It's, something totally different, like whatever your hobbies are or something, and you can talk about, or where you've traveled. But, I think people there are things about like, if you're, you're one of a few females, then sometimes they might relate to you differently because of that. And sometimes that can be good. Sometimes it can be really bad, because they will. There's been times like coaches for sure have been like probably like a little more hostile, like a little more upset when I'm asking them something. I think that's why sometimes.
You remind me of my nagging wife or something.
Right. They do that with the guys too, for sure. Like they get it bad
that's who
too.
they are,
But
that's who they are.
But there's like one coach I remember, kind of brought this is before I had a child, and I was asking about a player who had like multiple DUIs, and he's like, well, you don't have kids, so you wouldn't know. And I'm like, how do you know my reproductive history? This is so interesting. But, it's things that like wouldn't necessarily be said to a guy, But anyways.
But you're right. I think if somebody's hostile, they're
hostile to everybody. Then
quite
probably
a few figures in our media world today that get put off by the wrong questions. We see that all the time. Interesting.
People feed off you, connect, and I think that's part of like being a reporter, right? You're trying to connect with people in different ways and help them open up to you.
At some point, when you're covering athletes, and again, I'd probably have to go back to the Eagles more. If you, I don't know how much you can't help but somewhat befriend if you're dealing with the same athlete for 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
Does that happen? Like, did you, or at least they know you by name after a while?
Oh yeah, they know you, and like you'll chit chat about things or about
Did,
like a
Terrell
TV show.
Owens know you after a while, or
I don't think he knew anybody. I don't think he even knew his teammates. So we won't pick him. But other guys, like you get to know them, and they know or they know about your life a little bit.
Yeah,
but you definitely you're not going on vacation with them,
Sure,
or you're not going.
You're not having a drink with them.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So it's a different.
Maybe more so. Is it easier to maybe befriend or have that? I don't know, even an acquaintance type relationship with coaches and things like that. Maybe are they more accessible?
They're more
sometimes?
defensive.
They're more defensive. Oh,
but
sure.
Still,
okay.
But it's
they're steering the
it
ship.
Depends. But they're all different. So they're all so different. They're just like a wacky. Like, I would just love to bring a psychologist in with me to some of these, because I'm like, what's going on with this guy? They just are very, talk about unique people. You should have a coach on next, because whoo.
You need to slip it in there, man. You have to say something like, so what'd you think of the game today, and what does this ink blot look like to you?
And what happened in your childhood?
Awesome.
I mean, they're all like geniuses in a way. I mean, they do this really intense job that it's, I mean, I know everyone kind of has a stereotype of sports and the dumb job, but some of these coaches, I shouldn't say they're all geniuses, but some of them really
the
have
moving
some
parts
ways,
and having to come up with strategy for so many moving parts, and then still socially connect to so many different individual personalities. That's an art form in itself.
It's different, and
it's
managing that and knowing
that's,
when to push a player and be, you can be really mean to this player, but this one's going to play worse if you're mean. They've got to manage all that.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting profession, too.
It seems maddening, Well, so where are you with overall print media now? It's a weird time to exist in that world.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a certain amount of comfort because things are digitized, or is that a whole different thing?
Yeah, no, it's really different. It's very, very different. And even when I was coming into this, you saw the change happening.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a really uncertain future.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating and scary.
I would imagine, yeah.
But I've seen so many people
staple in media, the newspaper, the printed paper.
Yeah. And it's been interesting just the last, I don't know, half a year, I'd say, people I know and just people I've seen online are definitely taking a much bigger interest in investing in journalism again.
Really?
Which is, so it's really just this whole idea, the fake news idea and what's happening in politics and media being, labeled enemies. So I think there are people, I know a lot of people who gave, as a Christmas gift, a subscription to a newspaper. And
wow.
Just because you want to be informed in society and these are the best people to help you stay informed and know what's going on in your world. So it's a really uncertain time. The idea that it's online doesn't mean it's any more because we newspapers in general haven't really figured out how to make money off that.
I was wondering about that, how they're monetizing with the online presence.
Not because it's hard, because if you get everyone wants it for free.
Right.
And everyone thinks you should just be working for free, but it's it costs money to actually do this.
That's what I was wondering.
People places.
I'm assuming there's an online subscription,
right.
But then after a certain amount of time, you could just see an article as well. So it's
right.
it's
there's different ways to find it, and if you don't want to pay whatever to read an article in the Tribune, you're going to find it somewhere, that topic.
Yeah.
Somewhere, not always, because we do really good work.
Well, that's a scary thing, because in my opinion, a print journalist, it still can be one of the purest forms of journalism we have left.
It's, I think, the only one really, because Right.
And it's too bad that there's not a way to highlight that more to people, because
That's what we've got to figure out.
that's
right?
what you have to figure out, because the biggest problem, especially, let's forget about TV, because TV is so insane right now.
Right.
It's so insane.
And they have money. They have the money.
They
and
have
the
so much
commercials
money and all that, and they can press whatever agenda they want, and it's fascinating. It surprises me to where even if you're getting that pleasure out of the fact that you can listen to the news you want to hear.
Right.
You're not necessarily
Right.
going to get news so much as you can tell yourself, hey, this makes me happier over here.
You
I'm going
can
to go
tailor
to this.
the facts that you
Yes.
to what you
I'm
want.
going to go to this network because
Right.
they say what I want to hear.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Actually, I'm okay with
Yeah.
people thinking that way. Only if only they could identify what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like if you like the slant on whatever this political news or whatever this news is, even sports, you know
Right.
you're going to get a better painting of your
Right.
picture if you're seeing the news that's hometown news or whatever.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm okay with that if people could just get smart enough to realize what they're doing and just say, you know what, this is just a little bit different from me wanting, I like dramas better than comedies, so
Right.
I'm going to the drama. It's
Right.
it's conceptually the same thing. And if people can identify that and know that, okay, it's a little skewed, this portion of the news.
Yeah.
It's a little more my type of news. That's fine, but then go to print. Find where real journalism is. And I don't want to say that television isn't real journalism, because there are a lot of TV personalities that are doing it that impress the heck out of me.
Yeah, me too.
But, if you decide to go to a certain network that is more slanted, that's fine. But then make sure you're balancing that out. You know,
Right.
I mean, you can't, to me, it's almost like just having chocolate cake for dinner. It just have,
Yeah,
you need your
right.
greens. You need,
Right.
you got to fix your
That's a good
news
way of putting
food
it.
pyramid.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, people, and this is, I think, something journalists have to do, and I think, even schools, like, we should be educating kids on how to differentiate media, because you just hear the media, and like nobody's differentiating what that means. So like I see, like, people will refer to something they saw on Facebook. Like, there's a lot of people, I think, who don't know the difference between like a blog and like, something in the Washington Post or like their friend's Facebook post, and they all take it as like the same information and not see like there's different standards. This has been fact checked. Like, this person had to go through like several layers of editing and like justify their work, and this person's like sitting in their basement with a idea off of what they saw on TV, and not like doing the actual reporting. You see a lot of
it's
websites too
that's
that just,
fake news.
Even like website, like original reporting. Like, you see there's a lot of websites who just like will write their take off of like other people's reporting and just like put the link in there. It's like, just go to the original source, get some nuance to it. It's great to have perspective, to read. Like, I wish people would read the actual news article and then go get perspective.
See, but that goes back to what I'm saying. Like,
eat your good dinner first and then get your dessert.
Identify what you're doing,
right.
And I think the main thing that people aren't thinking about, they're not realizing that Facebook in general, or especially Facebook, a lot of those articles or things, it's not a reliable source. It's just somebody, anybody can put anything in print. Right. And the problem with the public is, once you see that it's in print, you just assume, well, it must be.
Right.
It must be legitimate.
Right.
It's in print,
and that falls a little bit on like journalists and organizations. How do we teach people to differentiate? I feel like we've got to kind of
why is it's so weird, and I think it's weird because presentation is too similar, because somebody's weird blog or something that somebody without any facts to back up what they're saying can put something on a website that looks absolutely legitimate, where
that's it.
Years ago, for newspapers, it was so obvious. Oh, here's
and that was your only choice.
Here's the Chicago Tribune. Here's the Sun Times. Yeah. Oh, there's the National Enquirer over there. And it was so obvious to know what was terrible
because of the dragon in the National.
Right. It was so obvious to know, like, I'm reading about my favorite coach right here in this Chicago newspaper, but over there where it says he's eating a dragon.
Right.
But you would know, and again, the people that would buy those rags, those mags without any true facts, they knew what they were reading for the most part,
so,
and that's what they wanted. So if only people could find a way, and I think It's tricky because it's all on the consumer, and that's where the problem is. Because right now, the media hasn't figured out how to do that and how to differentiate.
Yeah, we need to learn we need to figure out how to differentiate ourselves in that way, as far as like helping people, even within a paper. Because
we don't have time now that everything's clickbait.
That's it, right?
You don't have time to truly realize, oh, this is just the colorful, grocery store magazine.
And you have more information than ever. You have access to so much, like it's a deluge of information. How do you sort out what's good and bad information, or what's reliable, or what's not?
Yeah, I can't remember what professor I was here. I was hearing a college professor talk about how he has to really make sure he's hammering home to his students that Wikipedia isn't always fact, and people are starting to assume, oh, that's just fact. I mean, it's just so many things out there.
I had people say, well, like on Wikipedia it says this. I'm like, yeah, but like that gets changed like every 5 minutes, or people get mad at someone and they go in there and like change their nickname to something horrible.
So folks, I don't know the answer. We haven't.
We'll take ideas.
Yeah, we will take ideas. Yeah, but I think it's something that we should all think about, and it's. To be honest, it's something I never really thought about. The packaging, if something sounded incredibly outlandish online, if some news story popped up on Facebook or something, I could pretty much see, okay, this is way out there. Right. But there are certain stories where I didn't know, and it's funny because I had a fashion designer named Sarah Rose, who's pretty popular in Chicago. She is a vegan and so against so many things and meat related and stuff. And obviously somebody in her situation and her dietary choice makes something like a McDonald's just a pure enemy, an enemy to her body. Right. But she was one of the first people to sort of open my eyes to that fact. She said, I'm not a fan, yet at the same time, I'm smart enough to know, listen, if somebody says, oh, the Shamrock Shake is causing cancer, and you look at the source, you're going to see, this isn't true. Right. And she's like, I want it to be true because I'm against McDonald's or whatever. But even I have to know, like, okay, that's way off base.
Yeah. And like when you read something, it should be sourced. Like every line in a newspaper should be like, this person said this, or this is where
if it's not a major news source or publication, everybody out there needs to take a good look. At the very least, when you see the story pop up online, look at the bottom and see where it's coming from. And if it is something like, whatever, something that sounds strange, coolfacts.com or something.
Readthisonly.com.
Yeah, most likely it's fake. And we have to, since media hasn't completely figured it out yet, we have to kind of take a look on our own and be our own little detectives. And it doesn't take much to kind of look down.
Or check it with other sources. Like, is someone else written about this? Or, can I find other sources on this?
That's smart. So you're saying if you see something that's kind of an not even outlandish.
Yeah, you're just not sure.
Any kind of story, and you're wondering if it's absolutely legitimate, look for more sources. And you're either going to see not much.
Yeah, and check like with legitimate, see like has the new, or Associated Press even, like, just kind of your basic, here's the facts type of organization that
Associated Press, the AP, I mean, that's as generalized and
like
as
pretty
pure
cut and
fact.
dry. Here it is. So look and see if some kind of standard organizations have written this, or if you can confirm it. Because if it's something you care about, you should want it to be.
We're the only ones that can do it right now, and it's sad because I don't know if they'll ever figure it out because it's already snowballed into what it is. So it's kind of scary.
Time, right? So it's a weird time.
I mean, for someone like you, if I don't know. I think we're still a ways from print going away completely. It just seems, I don't know, But if something crazy, where does somebody like you, where's your next level of attack? Or is that the part that you're trying to figure out?
Right, yeah. No, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, this is, I always say I forgot to learn how to do anything else in life. Oops, I forgot to ever figure out a backup plan. But I feel like this is, whether it's in print or online, there's going to be, there's always a need for this. Like if if you're a democracy as a country, you want newspapers and you want people holding your government, and even in sports, holding people accountable and making sure they're telling you the truth. And so I feel like it'll be there, just maybe in a different format online.
When you're
or whatever.
In the situation you're in, you would think, okay, somebody with your knowledge and even your access, you could even start your own website and have an offshoot sort of blog, or is that such a conflict of interest you couldn't do something like that right now?
Yeah, that's difficult.
Because you're using your paper credentials to get those facts.
Right, yeah. So I have to, it's like definitely a conflict of interest. Like some people will do some freelancing thing, but it has to not be in competition with the Tribune. But nowadays, like almost everything's in competition because everything's online. So, it doesn't really matter what you're writing about in a way. I'm sure if I wrote about like some, runner in California, like that juggles when he runs, something crazy, like they'd be like, that's okay, go ahead. But so but yeah, I mean, I know someone in Chicago who, left an organization and started his own sports website and is doing well. And but I don't know, I'm just a writer. Like I just feel like that's what I want to, I just enjoy writing. So yeah, I haven't really thought beyond that. You're making me think.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, hopefully anybody listening is thinking, it's cool. It's such a cool career you have, and it's an interesting, unique skill that you have. I mean, that type of journalism, I hope it never becomes a lost art, because we need people like you in every aspect of the news, and it's so cool that you're still here and you're still that cool version. I mean, if you put the weird sexist things aside, you're still that cool version of the person in the press hat, like that adventurous thing is still there.
It is. It still has that spirit, and I feel like people who do it are doing it like, you feel like you're doing it for like a great, like working for a newspaper, you're doing it because you care about information, you care about journalism, you care about like the First Amendment, you care about facts, and you care about society. I think there's like some bigger things for most people when you do that for a living.
You sometimes go out and talk to students or like journalism?
Yeah, sometimes, right. So,
is there a common question that like up and coming journalists ask you, do you find, or?
I think some of these about just, what the future holds, and, a lot of people then maybe want to go into print, but know that TV, is going to pay you way more money. And second of all, it's probably more, it's maybe, I don't know, they're both pretty hard to break into, but big market TV is hard to break. There's only like one sports anchor on a TV network, so that can be hard. But, a lot of them maybe are considering more print or online things rather than like traditional newspapers. Or, then a lot of like I'll talk to or mentor female, aspiring female sports reporters, and they just kind of want to know about the dynamic of women in this job still. Yeah. So kind of like some of the things you've asked me about, but a lot of what the future holds, but it's interesting. I mean, it's cool to see. I mean, especially here in Chicago where you have like some really good journalism programs around. It's cool to see these young people coming up that do a really good job and care about it.
Well, I'm glad you take the time to mentor and stuff. That's very cool. Yeah.
I mean, people help me along and still do.
Yeah.
Like people from like when I was in college, that helped me out. So, you got to keep it going. And I like doing it because, you want the profession to continue in the right way.
Even though life gets in the way and life changes, and then you add, a child into the mix. Do you still love this stuff?
Yeah, I do. Like definitely now I'm, like we were saying, the trips that I would like try to make it a 2-day trip, I'm like trying to get back right away, or, figure out if he can come along, and so I can, see him if it's like a week-long trip or something. But it's just, I don't know. It's like you said, it's unique, and I've gotten to see really cool things and go cool places and meet interesting people, even meeting other writers. I really love, like, my favorite thing in the world is like the first day of the Final Four, and you walk into this big press room that's like huge, and just like all these like just rows and rows and rows and rows and rows of reporters, and like people you haven't seen all year because like this is the one time you see them all year, and everyone's following their team, and it's just like I just love that.
Do you have a favorite sports writer like that you consider, okay, that was the one,
Well, when I was in college, actually, David Haw, who's a columnist with the Chicago Tribune, he was my journalism professor. So, today, like I was texting him to get advice. So I'm like, I'm probably going to be like in a nursing home texting you like, what should I do? Because, I knew him when I was like 18 years old, and I'm still doing the same thing now. But, just like
you asked him before coming on the podcast, or for something else?
For something else, but just, still asking for advice on, just different stories or things. And Dana O'Neill, who works for ESPN.com, she was, she was in Philadelphia, and she worked for the Philadelphia Daily News. I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and we both covered Villanova basketball. And we just like, we were supposed to be competitors, but we just like had a blast and, competitive on your stories. But, she was someone in both their writing styles. Like, I feel like they really get to, I think I've learned a lot by reading their work, because they really look at things in a different way, and find things out about people that like you would never know otherwise.
Wow.
And just have a great way of telling stories, like being a storyteller rather than just like reciting the facts.
Yeah.
So I've learned those two. I'd say I've learned the most from. So everybody should read their work too.
So if people want to read Shannon Ryan's work, they can subscribe to the
yes,
Chicago
and
Tribune.
keep me employed
Keep
buying newspapers, buying your local newspaper.
Buy some newspapers, people.
Right.
It's still, all this talk about fake news and all that stuff. Well, there's still some true journalism going on out there, and one of the places that it's happening is in big city newspapers like the Tribune. So find her, and they can find you online as well.
On Twitter, at @SRyan Tribune is my Twitter handle. So you'll see a lot of college basketball stuff, other stuff too. Like, some of the articles I said I've written about that are a little different than what you might find on just your regular post-game type of stories.
Very cool. Well, we covered a lot.
Yeah.
You probably thought we were going to talk for 15 minutes and then we'd be done
I
with you.
enjoyed this.
Did you like this?
Yeah.
Did you have fun?
Oh, yeah. This is great.
Oh, thank you so much for doing this and spending the afternoon with me. So there you have it, folks. Shannon Ryan, talent. And I got a story. It's a breaking story. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it so much. Everyone, don't you love her? I love her. So have a great month. Have a great week. Have a great year. Go out and find your smile. Bye-bye. That was painless.
Yeah, that was fun.
Did you like it?
Oh, yeah. I really enjoyed that. It was like, yeah, you're right. Because you do in a very conversational way, which is really good. So I hope I did okay.
Yeah, somehow I should title this Chasing the Dragon.
Chasing the Dragon. Yes.
Welcome to my life so far. You'd think by now I'd be a star. I may be long-winded, but hey, there's just so much I have to say. Maybe lick your lips when you're hungry. Maybe drop your head when you're sorry. Maybe shake a bit when you're worried. That's